You want to make some picks on your favorite sports? Check out Underdog's Fantasy Pick'em game, where you can pick higher or lower on between 2 to 8 players and can win up to 325 times your entry by using code Niners when you sign up, and you'll get $1,000 bonus cash and a free pick.
From the alley-oops at Keysar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way. From off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Time to talk about 49ers free agent potential targets at safety. Because when it comes down to it, the 49ers need to address the safety position, and they've tried to do it for several years now. Whether it was drafting Talanoa Hufanga or Jair Brown or now Malik Mustafa, the 49ers have invested in safety. Now, it always hasn't been with a high pick, with Talanoa Hufanga, a fifth-round pick, Malik Mustafa, a 4, Jair Brown was a third-round pick. So the 49ers don't invest really high with the safety, but they've been able to get pretty good safety play through the years, whether that was Jimmy Ward, who was a former first-round pick, or Jaquiski Tart, who was definitely drafted later on. You have players that have fit and at least been able to work for this scheme. But the 49ers have been running into a problem when it comes to coverage. The 49ers safeties just haven't been quite good enough when it comes to covering the opposing team. They've been good in the box, and so you've heard everyone talking about we need a free safety in San Francisco. And I think the 49ers have been somewhat hoping that Jair Brown or Malik Mustafa would have enough speed to be a free safety. I think they were also preparing in case Talanoa Hufanga hit the open market and they couldn't re-sign him. So you've got a scenario where the 49ers have 3 safeties they like, with Hufanga being a free agent that they could bring back. But really, they don't have that guy that's a game changer at the position who's not Hufanga. I think Malik Mustafa is going to be a good player in the future. He's a guy that's continuing to develop, and I really like what he could be after his rookie season. And we're going to talk about Malik. We're going to talk about Jair Brown in this episode. We're going to talk about Talanoa Hufanga as well. Because we've got to set the table for who's going to come back to San Francisco and who's not, and then also set up who out there in free agency could come in and give the 49ers the player that they need, the positional depth they need, the guy that can cover in space and make it so the 49ers can run all the defensive looks they want to run when it comes to coverages. Because right now, they're a little ineffective when it gets into certain sets where you have a safety that needs to take the deep third. Maybe we're a step slow. And Hufanga used to make up for that with great instincts, but I'm not sure he's all the way back yet and completely back to playing all pro caliber football that he played when he really jumped on the scene a couple of years ago. So this is going to be a fun one. We have some links to Robert Saleh as well with some of these safeties. So that's going to be a big point of emphasis. But also we have guys who are excellent at certain things that could make the 49ers a little bit better. Now, I expect the 49ers to look at safeties in free agency, decide on Talanoa Hufanga. I also expect for them to take a look at safeties in the draft. There are some good ones that could fit what the 49ers really need and want at the safety position. So it's going to be a lot of fun in this episode. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP, odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online offers you everything and more to enhance your game and day experience. Visit the website today and make the day action count a little bit more. Bet Online, the game starts here. So, of course, I want to start with who the 49ers have already at the position. evaluate what they did well this year, what they didn't, and then see where the 49ers could get better in free agency, because that's the name of the game. If you're not going to get better in free agency, well, then there's no point in signing a player in free agency. You might as well roll with who you got and then draft a player that could step up. But there are players that are going to be available that could be upgrades over the 49ers' current roster players. But I want to talk about Talanoa Hufanga first, because this one's a big one. I think going in to the 2024 season, the expectation was Hufanga's coming off injury. We've got Jair Brown. We've got Malik Mustafa. The future looks bright, and Hufanga's probably going to be like Aaron Banks and ride off into the sunset and go play for another team, and we're going to have the young guy step up and be ready to go. Unfortunately, Jair Brown did not live up to expectation. Everything that we were hoping was going to happen after his really good postseason run and his good Super Bowl game was that Jair Brown was going to take another step forward. That didn't happen. In fact, I think Jair Brown actually took a step back. He missed more tackles. He just was ineffective in coverage compared to what we were hoping he would be. So could that be somewhat scheme? It could be. That could be a reason why maybe he's out of position. It wasn't kind of leaning towards his skill set. And that could definitely be something that could be fixed by Robert Saleh and getting more out of Jair Brown. And you're expecting to get more out of every player as long as you put them in the right situations at the right time. But you also have to be real with yourself and realize what somebody's strengths and weaknesses are. And if you can mask those weaknesses, then that player can work for you. If you can't, and they're highlighted by opposing teams, you might have to look a different direction, especially if they're not feeling like a great fit for your defense. I think right now the 49ers feel like they have three guys that are pretty similar in the way that they play safety, and they might want a contrasting player. But Hufanga had a 57.8 overall grade this season, which is shocking for a former All-Pro, but also shocking that a lot of people are talking about him potentially getting 12 to 15 million on the open market because he didn't have a really good season. That was 121st best amongst 170 safeties this season. He had a 60 pass rush grade. He hasn't blitzed as good off the edge as he did a couple of years ago. That was definitely something that he was good at. It hasn't been as good. I think part of the reason is no DeMeco Ryans. It just wasn't as good for Steve Wilks. It wasn't as good for Nick Sorensen, and that's part of it. His run defensive grade was still pretty good, 74.5. That was 36th best amongst 170 safeties. So it's not phenomenal, but it's pretty good. And so in that area, Talanoa Hufanga has continued to play well. And I think that's the expectation that everyone has had for Talanoa Hufanga, is that he would be good at stopping the run. But his coverage grade this year was a 52.4. That is below average. That's not great. That was 131st best. So that's the area of weakness. Now, just listening to what other people have had to say, some people that are pretty tapped in with the 49ers, there is a real belief that the 49ers want to bring Talanoa Hufanga back. And I do think they want to at the right price. The question is, are they okay with the Talanoa Hufanga and Malik Mustafa pairing at safety? Well, that's going to come down to Robert Saleh and feeling like he can get a certain look out of those guys. But I think they're going to have to invest at the position whether Talanoa Hufanga comes back or not. So this is going to be one of those keys. Will a team just go ahead and break the bank and offer him what people are thinking, that $12 to $15 million range, which would price the 49ers out? I think the 49ers want to pay Talanoa Hufanga a lot like they want to pay Dre Greenlaw, somewhere between that $8 to $10 million range. And I think if both guys agree, they can bring both back. I think if you get over $10 million for Talanoa Hufanga, I think the 49ers would reluctantly move on. I think they really like Huff. They like the energy, what he brings to the team, but they are looking to improve team speed in the secondary. They need to get better in coverage. That's not something Huff does really well. So that's something to remember when we're talking about Talanoa Hufanga. Now, when it comes to Malik Mustafa had such a good rookie season, and we'll go over his numbers a little bit. He was a 63.9 overall grade, which was 84th best. So he outplayed Hufanga in his rookie season. He had a better pass rush grade, which means when he was coming after the quarterback in the blitz, he did a really good job. That was 15th best in the NFL. So he's a top half safety in this league when it comes to getting after the quarterback. His run defensive grade was a 66.3, so not as good as Huff when it comes to stopping the run. So that's 82nd best, and his coverage grade was 60.1. So you're seeing the weakness of the 49ers secondary at safety was coverage. Both guys could do a pretty good job stopping the run. Hufanga a little bit better. So the 49ers like Malik Mustafa. They like Talanoa Hufanga, but they both have the same strengths and weaknesses. They're both good around the box. They're good at making tackles, but they're weak when it comes to coverage and consistent coverage. If you look at Hufanga, part of the reason that he was such a great all-pro was because he had the ball hawking skills. He came up with the interceptions. He made big plays and was around the football. But Tashawn Gibson was the one handling most of the coverage. He was the one handling the big tight end assignments and making sure that those guys didn't go off. And Hufanga was able to kind of roam and make some plays. And he would be in coverage too. I don't want to get it twisted that he wasn't. He did better in that situation playing for D'Amico Ryans. But just having that counterpart that was more free safety in Tashawn Gibson, even though he was in the latter part of his career, he still had the natural athleticism and ball hawking ability to make plays as well. So I think the player that you play with, the counterpart, is important to your success. I'll take it back to some history for the 49ers. There's a couple of occasions you could point out where you get that direct contrast. I think if you look back on those mid-90s teams and you have Tim McDonald, who is a strong safety type who could stop the run, was physical around the line of scrimmage, but could also cover when he needed to. And then you get a guy like Merton Hanks, who was a corner at one point in his career and a really good player at free safety. That's his natural position. And it was an absolute ball hawk and a problem. He could still tackle, but he wasn't as good around the box as Tim McDonald. That is the contrast. Then you look at the Harbaugh days. You got Dante Whitner. He's the heavy. He's the strong safety type. Not as good in coverage, but Deshaun Goldson was good in coverage. And Deshaun Goldson played really well in the box, too. He's more of the prototypical, what you want, the all-around safety. But those types of contrasts, I think, is what the 49ers are looking for. And so far, they haven't got it. Now, could Malik Mustafa get better in coverage? Absolutely. The guy was a rookie, and he showed some flashes, but I think they're looking for somebody else. And I think they were hoping that it was going to be Jair Brown. But Jair Brown had a 64.8 grade this year. That was 78th best. He was terrible rushing the passer, under 50% at 48. At run defense, he was a 53.6. So not great. Now, his coverage grade was 69.5. That is 33rd best. So if you look at his numbers and Malik Mustafa's numbers, right, you could see where those two guys, one's good at coverage, one's really good at stopping the run. I think the problem with Jair is, can he get better at coverage? Because right now it's not good enough. What he put out on film this year wasn't good enough in coverage. So he needs to get a lot better. If that grade was up to 78%, I think we'd be having a conversation about Jair Brown being your free safety and Malik Mustafa being your box safety, and you're moving on from Talanoa Hufanga. Now, Robert Saleh might believe he can get more out of Jair Brown. He might believe that he can get that coverage grade up, that he can put him in certain situations to be successful, run coverages that highlight his skill set, and then kind of shy away from some of the things that he's not good at. Same with Malik. But you also have to make sure that when you're doing that, you're not also hindering other players. So if you're doing things to help Jair Brown in coverage, is that going to hurt Renardo Green? Or is that going to hurt, your other safeties, or other corners like Deommodore Lenoir, or your nickel corner, whoever that may be? You have to remember that there's some significance to doing certain things. So can we highlight the strengths of all of our players while diminishing the weaknesses in certain coverages is part of the theme. So you like to have a more all-around safety, but those are hard to come by. Those are hard to find, and the 49ers got to do it. So let's get into our list of guys that are going to be available, and I tried to keep it, pretty to the 49ers scheme, what they're looking for, a more free safety type player to take over, and a lot of this is in case Talanoa Hufanga does move on. And safety was number 6 on my positional needs list because I felt like there were other positions, center, guard, linebacker, defensive tackle, that were ahead. And then, of course, kicker. That is another one. So safety was 6 as far as positional need for me during the offseason. And so the first one I'm going to talk about is Justin Reed. And I just want to say that Justin Reed's going to be too expensive. His last contract for the Kansas City Chiefs was $10 million a year. I fully expect him to be the top of the market. I expect him to get over $15 million a year. And I think that will price out the San Francisco 49ers who don't put that much of a positional priority on safety. They like having good safeties, but they really haven't been able to willing to pay high priced money. They did pay Jimmy Ward, but even then they weren't paying him top dollar when it comes to safety. So I throw him out. Now, the first guy I do want to talk about, and this guy has a direct connection to the 49ers, and that's Julian Blackmon. And the reason that I bring him up is last year, the San Francisco 49ers tried to sign Julian Blackmon, 6 foot, 202 pounds, only 26 years old. He ended up going back to the Colts on a 1-year deal. Now, he played over 1,000 snaps last year. He also had 3 interceptions. So Julian Blackmon's a guy that I think the 49ers would be interested in. He only made $3.2 million last season. He will be affordable. So the 49ers have showed interest. They were willing to go ahead and bring in Julian Blackmon. And now you've got a situation where he's back on the open market. And if you're deciding to move on from Talanoa Hufanga, then he's not worried about not starting. That was one of the keys with Julian Blackmon. He wanted to make sure he could start. And the 49ers were kind of in that interesting situation where they had Jair Brown and Hufanga was coming back at some point, and Julian Blackmon was more holding his position down, right? That is the problem that Devondre Campbell had. He was holding the position down for Dre Greenlaw, and I think at some point he felt like he was just going to be the guy, and you're not. When Dre Greenlaw's coming, you're not. When Talanoa Hufanga's coming, you're not. So Julian Blackmon could be an option for the 49ers because of what he does in coverage. They contrast to Malik Mustafa. He's a 73.5 grade, which was 23rd best in the NFL. And he was playing in a very similar system to what Robert Saleh is going to run. He played for Gus Bradley with the Indianapolis Colts. So this is going to be an easy transition for him if he decided to come to San Francisco. Now, the problem with Julian Blackmon is he is not good when it comes to stopping the run, a 55.1 grade. So in that category, that's what I'm talking about with the contrast. He's more free safety, better in coverage than he is strong safety. But we've seen that's Hufanga and Malik Mustafa's strength is playing around the box. So if you were pairing a safety with Malik Mustafa, Julian Blackmon would make a lot of sense. If you're pairing him with Jair Brown, it wouldn't, because Jair Brown and Julian Blackmon would not be able to stop the run. So this has to be a pairing with Malik Mustafa. But I think it would be an option because they do want to get better when it comes to coverage. They met with him last year. They came close to signing him before he decided to go back to the Colts. So that could be a possibility for the San Francisco 49ers. He allowed just 15 receptions last year. He had 3 interceptions and 70 solo tackles. It was a pretty good year for Blackmon. Now, next up on the list is a guy that would be coming over with Robert Saleh. And we talked about him a little bit last year, but the Cal product, Ashton Davis, and he's going to be a topic of conversation probably all over when you're listening to 49ers content creators and podcasters and everything else, because it just makes sense, right? He went to Cal. He's really fast. He played for Robert Saleh, and he actually played well. So he's 6'1", 202. He fits the bill. Now, he's a little bit older, 28 years old. That's plenty young enough for what the 49ers are doing. He also is a good special teams player. But last year, he only played 260 snaps, so it wasn't a big sample size. He's more of a substitute. But he had a 71.1 overall grade, which was 42nd best amongst the 170 safeties. And he had 2 interceptions, which was 23rd best. So even though he played limited snaps, he made plays. He was able to find the football. And here's what to like about him. So we talked about the 71.1 overall grade. His run defensive grade was a 73.4. That is phenomenal. But you combine it with a 67.8 coverage grade, and you've got a better all-around safety than Jair Brown or Malik Mustafa as far as numbers go, or even Hufanga. He outplayed all of them. Now, we got to remember it's a limited sample size, and if he's getting an extra 600, 800 snaps, that could definitely change. But with that, you had 2 interceptions. Could that change as well? Could you get an extra 3 or 4 interceptions out of Ashton Davis? Possibly. Here's why else it makes sense, because even if you brought back Hufanga, I know you've got George Odom, but he's a very good special teams player. And you need to get better at special teams. And guess what? His special teams coach, Brant Boyer, he's now the 49ers special teams coach. So to me, this is one of those situations where Ashton Davis makes a lot of sense for the San Francisco 49ers. I thought it made sense last year. it makes even more sense now. Now, it will come with a complete sign off from Robert Saleh. If Ashton Davis doesn't come to the 49ers, it's either one or two things. He didn't want to make the cross-country trip over to Santa Clara, or Robert Saleh didn't feel like there was more to get out of him because he is trying to improve the room. So that's something interesting, but I liked the player overall. I thought his numbers looked good. If you watch his film, he's a very talented player. I don't think he's ever hit his full potential. And only Robert Saleh knows why he only got on the field for 240 snaps, even though he was playing pretty well. Something to monitor. Could be a player that the San Francisco 49ers are interested in. He has a connection, right? The direct connections usually impact decisions, because when you've worked with a guy, you know what their skill set is. You know their strengths and weaknesses. You also know their demeanor. You know their work ethic, all of that. So there's no direct comparison to actually working with someone. So I think Ashton Davis makes a lot of sense. A lot of people have come on the channel through the last couple of years and talked about Ashton Davis. And now it's an opportunity for me to talk about him because I do think he's a possibility for the San Francisco 49ers when it comes to the safety position. Now, before I switch gears and talk about a restricted free agent, I want to go ahead and talk to you guys a little bit about Underdog Fantasy. So Underdog Fantasy does a really cool thing where if you sign up using the promo code Niners, that's NINERS, you can earn up to $1,000 bonus dollars and a free pick. And they've got this really cool pack going on right now for the big game. And you can go ahead and get in on that. And you can see you get, over 4%, 4 times the earnings for using this bonus pack. All you would have to do is the higher lower game, and you would be having Patrick Mahomes higher than 219 yards, 219.5 yards, so 220. What he'd have to get in the big game. Xavier Worthy would have to have over 4.5 catches, so 5 catches. And Devontae Smith against that very good Chiefs defense would have to have under 69.5 yards. So this is the type of thing that's available over on Underdog. I'm going to make my higher lower picks next week, and I'll put those out there. But I wanted to share that this pack is available for you, and all you have to do is click the link in the description, download the app, use the promo code Niners, and you could get $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. And hey, it helps me out as well. Underdog Fantasy, a lot of fun. I've been enjoying it throughout the playoffs. But I want to talk about a restricted free agent. And with the restricted free agent, it definitely gets a lot more complicated if you're going to try to sign him. Last year, the 49ers tried to get the same thing done, and they've been willing to go after restricted free agents in the past. And last year, it was all about tight end. And they tried to steal a tight end from the Detroit Lions, and it didn't work out. Detroit matched it. And so there is a risk with running through this. You put out a contract. If it gets matched, you don't get anything. Also, what tender do they put, right? So in this case, it's the Baltimore Ravens, and we're talking about Adarius Washington. They could put a second-round tender on him, and then when you sign him, you've got to pay the money and you've got to pay the second-round pick. So you got to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze. But the reason I bring up Adarius Washington, and he's not the prototypical 49er size. He's 5'8", he's 177 pounds. He is a prototypical free safety. So he had an 80.3 overall grade last year. That is 11th best in the NFL. Caught my eye for sure. His snap counts, he had a 726 snaps when he's on the field and 2 interceptions. But you're talking about a guy that's versatile, that can play, the deep third. He can line up against somebody in the nickel. He's got a lot of ability. But when you're looking at it, I'm always looking for those elite traits and how they combine with another player. And if Hufanga leaves and Malik Mustafa is going to be more of the box safety, somebody like this would make a lot of sense, right? You bring in Adarius Washington because here's why. An 84.2 coverage grade. 84.2. Phenomenal. That was 7th best in the NFL at safety. So is he going to give up some when it comes to run defense? A little bit, but not as much as you would think. What if I told you that even at 177 pounds and 5'8", he had a 64 run defense grade last year? This is a really good safety. And this is not your box safety. This is your single high. This is your guy that can cover in space. He can go in the nickel. There's a lot of things that he could do. 84.2%. Talk about versatility. This right here might be the perfect match for Malik Mustafa. Allow Mustafa to play in the box, do what he does well, stopping the run. be a good tackler like he is, blitz the quarterback, which he proved that he could do, 15th best in the NFL this year. Huge potential. But what is it going to cost to get a Darius Washington from the Baltimore Ravens? My guess is the Ravens are all in on bringing him back. They know what he means to their football team. I'm sure Seattle would be interested. They run the same defense as Baltimore. And I think the 49ers could be in on this as well. If you're going to pay at safety, this is the kind of guy you get, because he's not going to break the bank as far as it's not going to be a bidding war, but you have to be willing to put forth a little bit extra, right? Brock Wright, not able to get it from Detroit last year. They were able to match it. So it makes it a little bit more complicated, but this is the exact type of player you're looking for. Maybe you could find one in the draft, but I know this is the guy in free agency that you could find, because he's got a phenomenal coverage grade, and he did a really good job this season. The film pops. I was all in once I started watching what he could do. So restricted free agent possibility, Darius Washington. So now let's talk about Trayvon Moorwig. And this is a guy that everyone wanted the 49ers to draft when he came out, 6'2", 202 pounds, formerly of TCU. He had a 67.5 overall grade, played almost 1,100 snaps. So he stayed healthy all season. He's only 25 years old. 2 interceptions on the season, which is pretty good. He was a good pass rusher from the safety position. His run defensive grade is elite, 87.5. Your problem is his coverage grade is a 54.4. So this is one of those things where people are bringing him up. That's why I wanted to talk about him. Does he fit with Malik Mustafa? I don't think he does. So if Malik Mustafa is going to be the answer, or Talanoa Hufanga, I don't think that Trayvon Moorwig makes sense. Now, he could upgrade you in the box over, those guys. He's better than they are when it comes to run defense. I mean, he's top 10 in the league when it comes to run defense, which is phenomenal. But the 49ers don't have that cover guy that you could potentially put him with. If you already had a Darius Washington, this would be the perfect pairing for him, because then you could bring him in and he would be so good. But I just don't think that he makes sense with the current roster that you have with Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown. I don't think he really fits with what they do. If Jair was better in coverage, then maybe. But I wanted to talk about him because everyone's bringing him up, but I just don't think he fits. If you put him out there with Malik Mustafa, we would stop the run at a high level, and we'd probably get torched on the back end. Not exactly what the 49ers are looking for. So, unfortunately, I like the player. I think that he needs to get a lot better in coverage, but I don't think he's actual possibility for the 49ers. Now, another guy that comes to mind is Jeremy Chin, 6'3", 220. I mean, big, physically imposing player, played over 1,000 snaps last year, had 1 interception, and a 69 overall grade playing for the Washington Commanders. And so you're getting the Dan Quinn system. So we got a system fit in Jeremy Chin. So he had a 69 overall grade. He had a good run defensive grade of 72.2. Not great, but pretty good. And a coverage grade of 66.2. So not terrible. So this is a more consistent, more balanced safety. And I think that with him fitting the system, if you lose a guy like Talanoa Hufanga, bringing in a guy like Jeremy Chin could be an upgrade over Jair Brown. He's still young. He's still got a lot of potential, but I love the size at 6'3", 220 as far as comparing and matching up with some of the bigger receivers and tight ends over the middle of the field. So I think that he's somebody that could fit the 49ers, what they're looking for, if they lose Hufanga. I think in this case, they would probably prefer Hufanga because it's what they know. But if Hufanga gets away, they're going to have to try to decide on some guys, and I think he could be one of those options. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a couple older guys, in the grand scheme. Bringing guys in that have played in the system is something that's a key. And we've seen the 49ers have so much success with Tashaun Gibson coming in kind of late in his career and revitalizing his career. Going from a practice squad to, having a Pro Bowl caliber season when he first came to Santa Clara with the 49ers. I want to talk about a couple of guys who didn't play a ton of snaps, but played pretty well and could make sense as kind of a stopgap. Maybe Hufanga leaves and you are drafting a safety to step in, and maybe you want one of these guys as a veteran to come in because you don't have veterans there with Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown. I don't consider Jair a veteran. So this could be an option for the 49ers potentially, is Quandre Diggs. Used to play for the Seattle Seahawks last year, spent time with the Tennessee Titans, 5'9", 200 pounds, 32 years old, so definitely getting a little bit older. But he had a 73.2 overall grade in 2024. That's 28th best. 419 snaps, so didn't play a ton. He had no interceptions on the season, but still, you look at his number overall, he was a 70 run grade and a 70 coverage grade. Balance. When you talk about the coverage grade, that was 29th best. So you're talking about 64 starting safeties in the league. He's 29th best in those snaps. You feel like there's a lot to be had there. You could get more out of Quandre Diggs. So I think that this is an option if Hufanga leaves to be a stopgap. You go ahead and you draft, a guy like Texas's Makuba, bring him in, the speed, right? You've got all that quickness potentially that you could develop, and Quandre Diggs could kind of bridge the gap. If, in training camp, you're trying to decide who is Jair Brown, what can he do? I think that would make a lot of sense, especially since he comes from the system in Seattle that fits what the 49ers do. So it's a kind of it aligns. And that's one of the key things I look for when you're looking for free agencies the 49ers are going to be interested in. It's alignment. And this would be more of a stopgap. You get a bridge quarterback. This would be a bridge safety, but a pretty good one. Yeah, he's been in the league for 10 years. He's seen it all, and he played pretty well in his 400-plus snaps that he had this season. Now, another guy to consider that's a little bit on the older side, 30 years old, played for Robert Saleh before, is Marcus May. You're talking 5'11", 207. He played a little over 400 snaps last year, just like Quandre Diggs. He had one interception, 32.9 overall grade, playing for Harbaugh down there in Los Angeles. And same sort of thing, run defensive grade, 73.1, respectable. Coverage grade, 69.2. So not quite as good as Quandre Diggs, but 34th best among safeties. And that's what I'm talking about, the consistency with a veteran that could step in. Now, you can see Diggs has been a little bit better than May, but both of these guys are guys that would be familiar with the system, understand what's wanted, and could be bridge safeties until somebody's ready to take over. I think we saw some things with Malik Mustafa last year that we really love, and some things that you saw that were like, yep, that's because he's a rookie. He made those rookie mistakes. And I think that you're trying with this current roster that you have to make sure that doesn't happen. So Hufanga's gone. Are we just going to roll with Jair Brown and hope that it works? I don't think so. I think you want to bring in some competition that is young in the draft, but also maybe a veteran, an old hat that knows what's going on and can step in. They did it with Deshaun Gibson, and I think Marcus May and Quandre Diggs could be an option for the 49ers, especially, once again, Marcus May being top half of the safeties in the NFL when it comes to coverage grade. That's an improvement over some of the other guys. Now, Jair Brown, I want to make sure I give him credit. He was a 69.5. So him and Marcus May were really close. It's not like he was bad in coverage. The problem is Quandre Diggs and Marcus May are leaps and bounds better than Jair Brown in run defense. Jair Brown, 149th out of 170 safeties. That's just so bad. So if he was a lot better, if he was up there where they were, close to 70 in run defensive grade, we wouldn't have this conversation. We'd be talking about Jair Brown and Malik Mustafa being your safeties, but that's just not the case. And so the 49ers need to get a little bit better there. And the two old hats, Quandre Diggs and Marcus May, would make some sense for the 49ers. Now, one last one I want to talk about before I kind of throw out there who I think the best options are, as far as I think I'll just put them in order as like this is the most likely, is Javon Holland. And everyone's been talking about Javon Holland. He's only 24 years old, former Oregon Duck, and I liked him a lot coming out of the draft. And he's going to be a free agent at just 24 years old. So a lot to like about Javon Holland, but I think he's a lot boom or bust. Either really good, he's very streaky, or he's really, really bad. He did have no interceptions last season, even though he played 854 snaps. And his overall grade was just a 63. Not a great season. He was a 73.4 run defensive grade and a 57.1 coverage grade. Once again, it would be redundancy. So when you hear people bring up like Javon Holland, it's more of a redundancy. Yeah, he's really good when it comes to run defense. That's, makes up for Jair Brown. But you already have the guy in Malik Mustafa that can play around the box. And potentially you could just bring back Talanoa Hufanga. You're looking for that guy that could be a run stopper. Malik and them, they can tackle really well. So to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense for the 49ers. But since it's getting brought up, I wanted to go ahead and talk about it and kind of just dispel, the possible rumors of Javon Holland. To me, he doesn't make sense. You never know for sure. But I think the 49ers' ultimate goal is to bring back Talanoa Hufanga and make him a safety again. I think the safety of the 49ers again. I think if it's not him, I think I would put it in this order. I think Julian Blackmon would be the 49ers' first option at the position. I think Ashton Davis might be an option, whether it's to start or to just be a sub. And I think it's more likely for him to be a sub. So I think both of those guys would be interesting. And then I would keep a real eye on a Darius Washington and see what Baltimore does with him. If the Baltimore Ravens are unable to sign him to a new contract and he is a restricted free agent, I think if I'm the 49ers, I would go in, depending on what kind of designation they put on him. If they put a first-round designation, right, you're not giving up a first-round pick. They give him a second-round pick, you might think about it. If it's a original round, a basically, just a match-it deal, you're definitely interested in doing it. So we'll see if it's going to be an original round tender. If it is, we'll see what happens, but that's one to monitor. But I think if I was saying that Talanoa Hufanga left, the most likely thing I could see is the 49ers getting Julian Blackmon and Ashton Davis and having them come in to compete with Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown and George Odom. So that's kind of what I think. I think there's some guys out there that are interesting, guys like Quadre Diggs and Marcus May for the older guys, and then Jeremy Chin, who fits the system that you could bring in. But I do believe the 49ers are going to address in the draft, and I'm really excited to talk about those guys eventually. I want to get to free agency, and then I'm going to turn attention to the draft, except if you're over on Patreon, where I've already began the Draft Central conversation. Started talking about some of the high-end offensive linemen. Those are available over on Patreon, my breakdowns of those guys. So if you're interested in that, hop over to Patreon. Link is in the description, and you can do that. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Just give it a 5-star rating. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.